Hi, Melanie. Here we are. I'm Kassandra. This is Melanie Marco, and we are here for Cuddlist, the neurodiversity focus of the month. And you have kindly said that you would come in and chat with us about ADHD, and you are a Cuddlist practitioner in the Chicago area, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cool. So why don't you just introduce yourself for a moment, like who you are, what you love about cuddling, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I've been sort of exploring the cuddle space for about a year and a half. I was originally living in LA, and was involved for a moment with Cuddle Sanctuary based out of Venice. And when I moved to Chicago about a year ago, I really, first of all, just my experience attending cuddle events just opened up so much, such a part of me that I just didn't know needed to be opened up. It just felt, I say this in my bio too, it just felt like an opportunity to be in a space where you get to be fully human, where everyone just gets to be a human in the same space in a way that our culture doesn't necessarily allow, or that it kind of gets discouraged.
Yeah, actually, I really love that you're saying that in those particular words. I interviewed a client that actually I've worked with for the neurodiversity focus, and she also mentioned, she's like, one of the things she loves about the group cuddles and the one-on-one is feeling human. And so I love that you just said those same words too. And I think there's something uniquely human about being safe and being held that our culture doesn't support in most spaces.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of our humanness, our humanity gets sort of, I don't know what the word is, shrunken down or discouraged in favor of the culture that we live in, productivity and invulnerability, right? So there's just something very vulnerable and present and connected about being held by another person that is so innately, intrinsically important to us that we sort of don't hold a lot of space for.
Yeah, interesting. And we'll come back to ADHD in a second, but that vulnerability, that being able to, and vulnerability is sometimes heard synonymous with weakness in the wider culture, right? You're talking about that whole, like, you've got to be strong, you've got to, like, be the best, get it together, American Ninja Warrior, woo. And it's like,
Sure.
So to be vulnerable, we can think of it as a weakness, but it's like, let me take off the masks, let down my walls and the ways that I've learned to protect myself to move through the world in order to let someone in order to be touched, in order to feel human and welcome and safe and belonging. And I love all of those things so much about our work, and it's a lot of why I'm here.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And also does tie right into this celebrating neurodiversity. So neurodiversity being this concept that our brains, our nervous systems are wired differently, and that there's not a one right way, and anything different than that is wrong and needs to become that one right way, but a celebration of there are a lot of differences. And one image that works for me is, like, instead of us all being like Christmas trees on a Christmas tree farm, like we're all supposed to be exactly the same, it's more like a forest with like different types of trees and like bushes and flowers and all of the things that, like, diversity is really, it's resilient, it's flourishing, and to celebrate the diversity in our neurological wiring as well. So
yeah, I love that. And that's such perfect language for that. I just love the visual of we're all the same, and yet we're all so unique and different, and kind of grow and show up how we're going to based on, our uniqueness.
yeah, cool. So let's come into the ADHD stuff and tell me some things about it. Like, maybe when did you first maybe suspect yourself, but also when did you get diagnosed, and what's life, I don't know, did people try to cure you or fix you? Did they try to make you Christmas trees?
Yeah. So my journey, it's unfortunately not a unique one, but I think a lot of women go underdiagnosed, maybe less so now. But I wasn't even aware that this was happening for me until I was an early adult, like very young adult. So I was always a very bright, very smart kid. So it wasn't until there were a lot of changes in my life and sort of moving into more difficult aspects of school, like junior high, high school. There's also a lot of life transition at that point that I really started to struggle. And there's just, hold on, so It was something that was definitely present and became more present as time went on. And with ADHD, struggling to, it deals with the executive function. So making decisions can be harder. Things can feel overwhelming, things with a lot of steps. For me, it was things like doing my homework and navigating all the logistics of being a high schooler or somebody in junior high who's now like managing multiple classes. You're not in one classroom all day. There were also some life transitions that added to some overlapping trauma there that was just a lot of things. Hi, Kitty. A lot of things that made it really hard to process, you know, and stay on top of things. So really, when you say, did people try to fix you, in that sense, yes, without knowing what was going on, without an understanding of the neurodiversity, I really did internalize the message that I was broken, you know, like all of the typical parenting things. Okay, well, if we take away this, then she'll figure out this. If we do this, or it's like, there was just a lot of withholding and behavior modification that was just, none of us had answers. And my parents were doing their best, but there was just this sense of, you're not doing the things that you need to be doing. You know, how do we make that happen? And there was just such a lack of understanding all around that really created its own set of traumas that I've had to undo being an adult, on just being like, no, it is okay that I'm wired this way, and it is okay that I work a certain way, but I need to do things differently in a way that makes sense to me. And that was never an option that was available to me.
Can we just, like, for those of us who have kids who might have ADHD, or for, I don't know, for those of us who are watching, what would have been more helpful? Because, right, the standard parenting thing is you've got to get your homework done, you're not doing it. I don't know, you're playing video games or something, and so I'll take away the device that you're playing video games on, so you have to do your homework. Like, that's such a standard response.
Mm-hmm.
Like, dreaming yourself back there, what would have helped? Like, what did you actually need?
Well, I think if we unpack where parents are coming from, and it's really makes a lot of sense based on just the general attitude around parenting, kind of how we've internalized how our own parenting went, just the general social wisdom that we're told, you know, like there's just, kids are inherently good. Kids inherently want to be good. And so behavior is often an indicator of underlying struggles that kids just don't have the language or the mental tools to verbalize. So for me, what looked like apathy and what looked like, you know, I don't care, or like whatever, I don't like school, was really like, I'm overwhelmed and I don't even know where to start. And it's like, there's just really, so I guess to answer your question, curiosity, because I can also acknowledge that my behavior must have been very confusing. You know, like, what, don't you want to do this? Like, don't this, a thing with ADHD is that intentions and actions often have trouble meeting up. Where I can,
and obviously you're smart, so your parents are like, you can totally do the work. We know it's not like you're dumb and you can't get it.
No, thank you for saying that. That was actually another thing about ADHD, is that sometimes I'll have thoughts and like thoughts will bottleneck, and I'll be like, I have all of these thoughts that I'm trying to say out loud. So anyway, I appreciate you saying that. So that's exactly what I wanted to touch on earlier. There was always this talk of like, you have so much potential. You have so much, you know, you're so smart. We know you can do this. So it was always equated to, well, so you must not want to. You must be doing this on purpose.
Right.
Like, maybe not in so many words, but there was always this sense of,
right, we're disappointed in you because you have all this potential, right? That kind of feel, I'm sure, was there.
Absolutely. And so there is just this, I remember being a kid and being sort of grappling with like, I know I'm good. I know I'm trying, but like, there's almost, I don't have any evidence to give them otherwise, where I'm just like, maybe what they're saying is true. Like, I don't have any answers either. And so that's kind of where that kind of got hard, is like over time, not really having any answers or getting curious about what else could be going on. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
It does. And again, I'm curious on like, what would have helped? Would it have been a quieter space or somebody sitting with you? Like, if we got curious with you at that time, when, and I know this is like a long time ago, but if we got curious with you, like, what would have changed how it felt for you? What would have helped with the overwhelm, or to have the executive functioning be easier to like sort out the tasks? Because executive functioning, that's things like what? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so executive functioning covers things like tasks, like sequencing, and these things that, like decision making and all of these things that are very concrete and task oriented. I'm sure there's a better way to describe that, but that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, it's like the to-do list and being able to prioritize what gets done rather than just getting swept up by like, oh, this thing right in front of me. But, oh, this other thing is important, like homework, for instance, rather than,
Yeah.
I don't know, art. Oh, look, my art's right here. I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
totally forgot about my homework. It's not that I don't care. It just wasn't in my head at all. Something
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah, it's a combination of both of those things. There's like with some of the ADHD experts that I follow, one of the terms that I love is that for ADHD, there's either now or not now. We sort of see time on this as though you were looking at a timeline through like a very narrow telescopic lens. And it's just like, it's like our window of awareness is just this very small circle. So unless we're being very conscious and we have a lot of external things reminding us that other time exists,
Mm-hmm.
right now is what's the most real.
Yeah. Yeah, now and not now. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's like either what's happening or it's not real, right? It's like it's abstract real, but it's like it's not made real until it's here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's hard to be like, if I don't do this, these are the consequences later. It's like, well, that's not happening now. So I think to answer your question, I think getting curious might have looked like an assumption of good intent, right? And I think that's really hard for a lot of parents when they're kind of at their wits' end. They're like, I don't know how to reach this, but just remembering that kids are inherently good and want to be good. And when they're not, that there's more going on. And I think if we put it in the context of what's available now, because I don't know that a lot of info on ADHD was available when I was that age in a way that it is now. But now that might look like doing some research and really trying to be informed and seek out as many different possibilities. I think it all comes down also to a foundation of creating a safe space, which is how this relates to Cuddlist, is like creating a safe, non-judgmental space without shaming or without making someone feel like they're being different. Or I'm just thinking back to, there were a lot of moments where it was like, we just don't understand you,
Yeah.
and that's hard. Instead of being curious of like, how can we collaborative, I guess would be one of the things that would have helped a lot. Just having a sense of collaboration and like, how can we figure this out together? Like, I'm here next to you. How do we do this? Instead of like, how many things do I have to take away before you just stop being the worst? It's like kind of the message that we give kids sometimes,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. It's like, it's a sitting with, let's look at it together, rather than, kind of the talking, and the parents kind of do this because they're taller, right? The talking down, the like, I'm going to take away the privileges until you get yourself together. Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. And I love that you just tied that into the Cuddlist sessions. And because that's so much what we do, is we welcome our clients as they are right now, regardless of whatever is there, whether it's trauma or neurodiversity, or they're bored, or they're just lonely, or they haven't had a date in a while, or whatever it is that our clients are coming with. It's a safe space to be human.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things for all of you watching out there. It's one of the things that can be easily overlooked, because we think, oh, if I'm going to pay for touch, it must be because whatever, I'm not in a relationship, or there's trauma or something like that. And all those could be, but it's also just, come have a safe space to be human. Come have time with another person where you can be fully yourself and be held if you would like. And talk a little bit more about that and how Cuddlist has impacted you, particularly like the way that ADHD impacts you, like how the two kind of come together.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know that I often think about it really directly how they're related. When I make the connection, I think it really, in terms of, for me, it works really well for me being able to devote all of my attention to one person at a time. It's not task oriented. It's so amazing to me that I get to do something that's so within my innate organic skill sets, and then I get to get paid enough to do it that I can actually do this primarily, and that's amazing.
Yeah, well, it works really well with the whole now, not now thing. Like, now is this person in front of you, and so there's this amazing gift of all of your attention being now with them, which feels amazing.
Totally. And there's just an ability to hold presence and connect in a way that feels, again, incredibly present, that I think really works well for an ADHD mind, because we can just be literally, sometimes nothing else exists if we're immersed in something. Literally, I do forget about everything else because I'm just present with that experience. So it works really well. And it also is validating in that I get to use my human gifts, that it sort of feels like it's outside of what's typically considered, what's the word I'm looking for? What would be considered like traditionally marketable skill sets, right? It, just getting to really hold that presence for people, hold that non-judgmental space. And so that feels really meaningful for me. And I think of the gift it gives others is that kind of the same thing, but there's just a sense of, it feels like a gift that I get to give others that sort of in a way heals things that I didn't get, right? In a way it's very detached, but it's like it feels very rewarding in that sense, that I get to be that for somebody else, like, a space where I don't assume that I know them. I don't assume that I know where they're coming from. I don't expect anything of them besides just to be exactly where they are in that moment, which is what we all do in our Cuddlist sessions. And it's such a gift.
And to sit with somebody without an agenda, right? You don't have a script for how even the session should go, but certainly you don't have a script for what this human with you should be doing or how they should be in their lives, right? You get to be with them in that snapshot of right now. And again, the assumption of good intent, right? You're like, wow, you are a good person, and here you are right now, and here I am right now.
Yeah. And I think that's such a gift that we give clients too, just the unconditional positive regard. Even if they ask for something that we're not comfortable with, even, if we have to hold to our boundaries, there's still a sense of, it's okay that you asked. It's okay that you are who you are.
Yeah, right. That is such a lovely thing to be able to say, if perhaps I don't particularly like my face or my ears touched. And so if a client's like petting my hair and they keep going over my ear, I'll say, I'd like it if you, avoided my ear, please don't touch my ear. And so, right, I'm telling them not to do the thing they were just doing, but there's no, oh, and you're bad because you did it, or you're bad because you didn't remember, or you're bad because you like touching me that way and I don't like it, or I'm bad because I don't like it. Right? There's none of that weird underlying stuff that can often come along with setting boundaries. Yeah. So it's just like, hey, don't touch my ear. Oh, okay, sorry. No worries. No problem. Just don't touch my ear.
So liberating.
Yeah, it's really simple.
Yeah.
Cool. What would you say to someone who has ADHD and is, like, what might they be experiencing that a Cuddlist session would help with?
Aside from, really, truly what we've been talking about, the unconditional positive regard is huge. Like that piece alone is just huge.
Right. So they might be having they might have a pretty intense inner critic that's like, oh my gosh, I never get it right, or I'm always off step, or I don't make sense to people, or whatever. And so coming to a space where, gosh, we love you just the way you are would feel really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And things specifically that can show up with ADHD that mean a lot when people can hold space for is, depending on whether we're having a good day or a bad day, again, time blindness, right? Time doesn't make sense to us. It literally just feels like this abstract concept that we're trying to kind of play by the rules with, but it literally just doesn't make sense to us a lot of times. So somebody who's running late for a session, maybe, right? Just holding those things and accounting for the fact that somebody may have struggles that aren't necessarily showing up. And the time we can hold time boundaries, so whatever session time we have is whatever we have. There's also a sense of just, this is your time to do what you want with. If you're 15 minutes late and we only have the remaining time, that's just okay. It goes back to the safe boundaries where it's just, this is what's comfortable for me, this is what you're able to do right now.
So on that, just, I, as a practitioner, would keep my boundary. I wouldn't say, oh, it's okay that you're 15 minutes late. We'll just start 15 minutes late and still do the full time, and it might mess up my day. Like, not that kind of thing. But yep, this is our time container that we agreed on. You're 15 minutes late, but I'm not going to tell you you're bad because you're 15 minutes late. I'm going to keep the container and welcome you just like you are, right? That's again, like keeping the boundaries without shame.
Absolutely. And that sounds so simple. Even as I'm saying it, I'm like, well, yeah, of course. In our line of work, it's a yeah, of course. But there's just this sense of someone who's struggling is maybe 10, 15 minutes late in the world. That can sometimes be perceived as people think things mean certain things, right? If this person shows up,
It means you don't care. It means this isn't important to you.
Right. This isn't important to them. They don't value my time. They don't prioritize, like it means so many things to people. And so just even this simple act of like, it's okay, we have this amount of time, but it's just okay is a big deal.
And perhaps if you know this about a client, that they struggle with time management, you can also talk to them about if it works for the practitioner, like, would you like me to text you an hour before the session? Just saying like, hey, look forward to seeing you in an hour, right? I've got a client that I did that with. He's like, I can get super swept up in things. Would you be willing to remind me? Sure. Yeah. That works. Yeah. So I just put a reminder in my own phone because I'm not going to remember either, but it goes off. Hey, text your client. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think even just opening up the conversation is like, is there anything that I can do to help you? I noticed that this has been something that's been a challenge for you. Is there anything that I can do to make that easier for you? That might open up the conversation about that. With ADHD, everyone's going to be different and receive things differently. For me, sometimes it can be a trigger for me when someone's like, well, or actually the reminder thing felt fine, but as soon as it gets into problem solving, it feels really familiar and it can kind of feel like a trigger. If it's like, have you tried setting an alarm? Have you tried, like those
right.
kinds of
So for somebody saying to you, let's fix you. You're not doing this right. Yeah. That doesn't feel so good.
Different? Have you tried trying harder? So if it's just like an open-hearted, very like, is there anything I can do to help? Like that feels like an invitation. But
thanks for distinguishing between those two, right? Is there anything I can do to help? Or do you want to look at this together versus have you tried setting alarm or trying harder or whatever, right? Like instead of kind of fixing or problem solving them, hey, is there something we can do together? Yeah. Very cool. I'm also thinking on timing that, say my sessions are usually an hour and a half. And if an hour and a half session, if one doesn't have some kind of like sense of time passing, it can seem like, yeah, we're just in this timeless now, and suddenly it's done. It could be kind of jarring. So maybe even asking someone who either has ADHD or has mentioned that they struggle with time and tracking it, like, do you want like a timer halfway through that then we're at the halfway point and maybe you want to do something else. I always do a 10-minute warning, but just 10 minutes might be really abrupt for somebody, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's a good point.
With it?
I think it might depend on the individual as well.
Yeah.
I think what I try to do just to account for all possible, mindsets that are coming to me for the first session is I just try and communicate so clearly what the expectations are, exactly how the session's going to go. So there's no surprises later in terms of I'm going to set a timer for this time. And then I kind of will leave it open. Does that feel okay with you? And leave it open for them to be like, actually, maybe I would like a timer in the middle, because I think there is also, as long as you're creating space, it is a responsibility of the person to identify and communicate their needs. All we can do is open up the space for it, right?
Right. And actually pause. I'm just going to interrupt for a second and say, yes, because that's so important. Our sessions are client-led. It's not about the practitioner being the perfect ADHD environment or whatever, right? It's whatever somebody might be thinking, I've got to do this, or taking notes, or, about what we're saying here. Remembering that the sessions are client-led. And so it's very much about just tuning in with that person who's there with you, but asking curious questions, like you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. And the 10-minute warning has worked pretty well for most people, I think, because I also think that, just getting into semantics with a specific example, I know you were just throwing it out as an example, but I think that could actually interrupt the ability to get lost in the moment, right? Where transitions are important. Transitions are really hard for people with ADHD. So having some kind of transition, I think, is always important, rather than just be like, the session's over, we're done. Some clients prefer that and they ask me for that. But having some kind of transition time and communicating clearly what this is going to look like. I personally, because I need it, I have a visible clock, a very visible clock in my living room that they can glance at if they want to, that I frequently do just to make sure that I'm kind of, you know, staying aware of what time it is pretty much all the time. But so yeah, things like that. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Great. Yeah, you totally did. Let's close with a short kind of what somebody with, I guess, coming back. Yeah, I mean, maybe I've already asked this question. Sorry, I'm sort of stuttering over my words here, but someone who has ADHD and is thinking about cuddling, just give them a short, like, yes, I recommend it, and here's why.
Seeing a cuddlist or becoming a cuddlist?
Let's do both.
Okay. Might be the same. I just wanted to get clarity on what you're asking.
Yeah.
I think it can provide a level of connection and presence that feels nurturing. It feels safe. It feels calming, and it can create a really beautiful opportunity for stillness, which no matter how ADHD presents, there can be a lot of internal chatter and a lot of racing. So just really focused connection in a way that sort of provides for a little bit of peace and stillness that I think can be really valuable for people with ADHD. And again, the unconditional positive regard is such a huge benefit. Anytime that any of us can really experience that is so healing and good. But someone who has ADHD or someone that maybe has had it for a while and went undiagnosed for a while, the negative messages that they receive over time really kind of stay in there. So just having a space where everything about you is okay and this is okay is just so healing and so lovely, and it's so different than what the typical experience might be, especially again if it's something that's gone unaddressed for a while. We spend a lot of our lives just having people frustrated with us. The people that we care about most are pretty frustrated with us a lot of the time, and that's a hard experience.
Yeah. So to have people close, to have someone close to you in an intimate way who's really doing this unconditional positive regard, and who you are is welcome, just like you are. Yeah, that's a healing space.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, Melanie, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience here?
I'm not sure. And I'm realizing I feel like I had so much to share, and I hope what I've shared has been helpful, but it's one of those, like, thoughts bottlenecking thing where I'm like, I think I covered the things, but I don't know. So anyone who's curious, feel free to send me any direct messages, or if you have any follow-up questions or anything I didn't cover, feel free.
I have one question. You mentioned experts and resources. Are there like a top 2 or 3 that you would recommend? So for somebody who,
Absolutely. So Dr. Ned Hallowell is somebody that I really love. He's a child psychiatrist. He specializes in ADHD. He has ADHD. And the way he characterizes ADHD traits is very strengths-based. And it's just such a beautiful way to characterize the ADHD brain. And that would be such a wonderful resource if you're wanting to learn more about that. Ari Tuckman is also a really great resource. He's also a psychologist who specializes in ADHD, but more for adults. Those are the 2.
So Hallowell, Hallowell, Hallowell? Okay, and who is the second one? Ari
Tuckman. So Tuckman. ARI, and then TUCKMAN.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, great. I think they both have podcasts. Ned Hallowell also, I believe, has some courses. I think his practice is more geared towards kids, but you can just search him and look for his talks and all of that, or listen to his podcasts, and it's just, there's a lot of really beautiful insights there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you found your way to Cuddlist, and that this work allows a lot of your strengths to be here, particularly that now, not now thing. Like, you just get to be so present and focused with your clients with your unconditional positive regard. Yay!
So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been great. Bye, Melanie.